Okay, so hopefully we won't have the audio problems that we had last time. My portable little lapel mic, for whatever reason, is shutting itself off. Changed the battery in and it's still doing it, so I don't know what's going on with it. So I just brought my big one, and I'll just have to stay a little closer, but that's okay. So a few things that I want to talk about today. This time of the year always is kind of a fun time for us chemists because it's when the Nobel Prizes come out. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Nobel Prize today. We're going to talk a little bit about, again, some stuff with faculty and former Golden Eagles. But also I want to remind you of a couple of things that are coming up. Your second one-on-one meeting with me will be due soon. So we've got about 9-10 days left on that. So if you've sent me an email and I didn't respond, I've probably lost it. Please send it again. This past week has been just murder in terms of the number of emails that I've gotten, and if I missed you, I sincerely apologize. If you sent me one today, don't worry about resending that. I'll get to it. So we need to schedule those for those of you who haven't had your second one-on-one. Don't forget your virtual activities assignments need to be done. You can complete those at any time. So if you have a question about an activity, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I have not graded your CV assignment yet, nor your resubmission of your semester by semester guide. So don't panic saying that things haven't changed with that yet. Those are on my to-do list, and I will get to them. In terms of some other things that I wanted to talk about was I've given you an extra credit opportunity to do a course that we have put together here at the university on the pandemic. It's called Understanding the Pandemic. It's a short course presented by USM faculty. I helped put this together. I am not in any of the content. I just helped organize the course. This is a course that you can actually share that link with anybody, and anybody can actually view the materials. Not anybody can complete the little quizzes or that kind of thing or print out the certificate, but it is available to anybody. And so if you were to go into that course, you would see that it's got a welcome from the president. He made time to address this particular course. This course has been given out to the public. You may have seen it talked about in the news. But there are 6 modules, and you need to complete all 6 modules to get the extra credit. You can complete them in any order that you wish. It's not you must do 1, then 2. Then they're just 6 modules, so find the module that interests you the most first and do that and just work your way through all of them. But each one of these is presented by at least one faculty member here at the university. So module number 1 is what is a pandemic. Talks a little bit about the history of pandemics, what a pandemic really means, how pandemics have kind of changed history a little bit for us. So that should be interesting to a variety of you. And that's actually presented by Dr. Janet Donaldson. She's a biologist and kind of an expert in this area. She's also our Associate Dean for Research in the College of Arts and Sciences. We also have, by Dr. Ward Sayer, a module on the economics and social impacts of the pandemic. So, it kind of gives a macro view of how the pandemic has impacted the world economy and what we might expect moving forward with that. So I found that particular one certainly because it's not in my area, right? I'm a scientist, and this is more economics, and so I found it very interesting and very informative. We also have Dr. Fengwei Bai, another biologist, talking about coronavirus and epidemiology, telling you a little bit about what coronavirus really is and the epidemiology of that. Dr. Alazri and Susan Dobson talk about the spread prevention and treatment of COVID-19. They've brought some people into their videos from Forest General Hospital. So you're getting medical expert advice as well, talking about how to prevent the spread and treatment of COVID-19. And then Dr. Karen Coates, she is our dean of the graduate school, and she's a virologist, actually. And so she's actually talks about vaccines and the technology behind vaccines. So it's kind of an interesting historical perspective on how vaccines came to be, how they typically work, and what are some of the emerging technologies in vaccines. And again, this is all done from a kind of a 50,000-foot view, layperson kind of thing. This is the kind of thing you can send any one of your family members, and I think they would get some good use out of it. And then the final module is on health and wellness during a pandemic and the need to remain physically and mentally fit during the pandemic. And this is presented by a variety of faculty in the College of Education and Human Sciences. So there's videos on not just staying healthy, but how to stay healthy. So how you can exercise at a time of a pandemic. For those of you who were used to going to a lot of gyms and things like that and are kind of avoiding that now to avoid contact with folks, there's some tips in there about what you can do to stay physically fit. There's also some discussion on how to stay mentally fit, how to keep from getting in depressions, those types of things. And there's also a section on nutrition, so the things that you should be eating all the time to maintain good immune system kind of health as well. So all of those 6 modules are there. Each one takes approximately 30 minutes to complete or to completely watch. They are not by any stretch of the imagination mentally taxing to watch. I think they're all very informative. The little quizzes that come along with it are pretty straightforward. You don't have to have a scientific background to answer them. All of the content that you need are in the videos. And then when you complete all of that, you can actually print a certificate. And when you get that certificate, you would then take a picture of it or save it as a PDF file, whatever, and you would re-upload that into our Canvas shell as proof that you completed. And then when you have that and write the little statement that I want you to write, a little paragraph or whatever, you can get up to 20 points of bonus credit. So that will help if you missed an assignment or whatever the case may be, you can get those points as bonus points. So since it's bonus points, and when you look at the assignment in Canvas, it says 0. So then when you go through and do everything and you get the 20 points, it'll be 20 out of 0. So that means it's 20 bonus points. So don't think it's for 0 credit. It is for 20 points of credit. And so I highly encourage each one of you to do this and share it broadly. Share it with your friends, share it with your family members, whatever the case may be. You've got the link in our assignments. So if you go to assignments, you'll see that that bonus question bonus assignment is there, and there's a link to that particular course. You can copy that link and share it again with anybody. Anybody across the globe can have access to the material. So please share it broadly. Share it on your social media, whatever the case may be. Help us get the word out. We're trying to give people information to help them through the pandemic. And it's all scientific information. There's nothing political about it. We're not taking sides. The only side we're taking is the side of just people having the knowledge that they need to help them get through the pandemic with the concerns that they may have. And people, as you know, are not just having health concerns, but they're having financial concerns. They're having concerns about how do they exercise and what does all this stuff I'm hearing on the news mean? And so that's really what we're trying to get at with that particular course. Are there any questions about that before we move on into today's stuff? So again, that's a bonus. You don't have to do it, but it is can only help you, and I hope you can complete it, and I hope you share it broadly. All right, so this week I showed you a video that we put together with Dr. Miao. I'm not going to go through and play it for us today. We're going to discuss it a little bit though. And of course in the thumbnail comes up some of the students that Dr. Miao has taught his recently graduated PhD students in his area. What was the main theme of Dr. Miao's research? If you had to sum it up, what would you sum up his research? Damien?
It was like electrochemical like sensors and kind of like last week with like detecting like he said he got with like Zika used like to locate like the Zika virus in somebody, things like that using electricity and chemistry together.
That's right. So he studies electrochemical processes and makes sensors. Largely is his main research thrust. Chemistry, if you really think about it, right, it's the study of matter and the changes that matter undergoes. That's what chemistry is, okay? So why would electrochemistry be central to that? Did anybody have a thought? How do chemical reactions occur? Okay, a transfer of energy typically happens of some sort, and we typically think of that as a transfer of electrons, right? The thing that separates chemists from physicists is the part of the atom that we study. Chemistry is all about those little tiny particles on the outside called electrons, okay? Everything in chemistry is about the electrons, okay? By and large, although this is kind of a little tiny lie, but by and large, we don't care about the nucleus. We really don't care that much about the nucleus. Okay, you can think about the nucleus as it's just the placeholder, the charge placeholder for all the electrons. It's the electrons that are doing all of the chemistry. When a bond forms, either you have electrons that get transferred and you have like a salt, right, like chloride and sodium plus, and you have an ionic bond. You all know about ionic bonds, right? You can share electrons, right, and those are covalent bonds, right? And it's all about the electrons. That's the important thing. And so electrochemistry gives us the opportunity to really interrogate a molecule's electrons, right? Does that electron transfer from that molecule to that molecule? You can do that from electrochemistry. Okay, so electrochemistry is central to everything that happens both in just regular chemistry, biochemistry, biology. You're always talking about electrons. We breathe in air. That air oxidizes biomolecules. It releases energy, right? And that's all because there's electron transfer. Okay, so what's going on with the electrons is very, very important. Dr. Miao, however, uses those types of processes to build sensors, as Damien just said, right? And so, for example, he's built sensors for the Zika virus. You might recall that was a big hot topic, I don't remember how long ago now, but a few years ago, right? People were concerned about Zika virus, West Nile virus, other viruses, and he figured out ways using electrochemical techniques to where you could actually detect those types of molecules. He's done explosives detection. Okay, so trinitrotoluene, I forget the name of it, but it's a peroxide. Well, it's made from acetone and peroxide. I forget the acronym for it now. Forgive me, but so those are typical explosives that like terrorists like to use. They're easy to make from materials that you can get really at the hardware and drugstore. And so being able to detect those is very, very important. And you would like to be able to develop a device that could be handheld, right? You would like somebody at a airport check-in or a bus stop or a train station or whatever to be able to test for residual explosives pretty easily, okay, to avoid terrorist attacks and those types of things. So he's really involved in how can you use this process of electron transfer and electrochemical processes to do things other than just study the chemistry. How can you practically use it in a way that can detect important things? Now, he largely focuses on those types of things, but you can also imagine other things. You can imagine a lot of health-related applications for electrochemistry, right? You can imagine detecting blood sugar. You can imagine detecting a lot of different metabolites in the bloodstream using small electrodes that are useful for, or that could be used to detect those types of molecules. So there's a wide range of possibilities in the electrochemical field. And so if you're interested in knowing how much of something is in the environment, or if you're interested in knowing how much of something is in a biological sample, Dr. Miao's research might be something that you might want to consider. How does his research differ from what Dr. Wallace taught or talked about? Mac?
Dr. Wallace was studying more of inorganic chemistry, while I guess Dr. Miao kind of does more of biochemistry.
Certainly Dr. Miao is more bioanalytical. That is certainly true. And Dr. Wallace is a little more on the inorganic side with it, right? Dr. Wallace was not using, or at least in what he talked about, he was not using electrochemistry as a technique to detect these molecules. He was using other types of spectroscopy. He was basically using light, right? So you can imagine his Venus flytrap capturing something and the sample changing color, okay? Whether we could see that with the eye or not, but that's what would happen, and you could detect that. Whereas Dr. Miao is trying to do this when something interacts, you see a difference in how electrons get transferred, and you can measure that potential difference. Other areas that Dr. Miao is interested in are things like fuel cells and batteries, right? And why are those a big hot topic these days?
New sources of energy.
Yeah, so we're always looking for new sources of energy. There's a reason why oil is called a fossil fuel, right? It is not a renewable energy source. We seem to be able to find more and more pockets of it, and we seem to be able to develop more and more technologies to extract the dwindling resources better. But nonetheless, it is a resource that has a finite lifetime. And from my viewpoint as an organic chemist, that's where we get a lot of our molecular diversity is from crude oil. And we make a lot of important things from it other than just burning it, okay? Crude oil, if you take any kind of medicine, chances are crude oil has come into play. If you use any type of material like plastic in your car, your automobile, or your cars, your devices, your home, whatever the case may be, crude oil is very, very important for those types of materials to be made. And so from my point of view, it's kind of almost a sin to burn oil because once you burn it, you're not going to get it back in our lifetime anyway. And so people are trying to find alternative sources of energy that are more renewable, less environmentally impactful, and to be quite honest, from my selfish point of view, reserves the oil for other more important uses. I would much rather use oil to make medicines and materials and things of that nature than to burn it and never get it back. And so he's interested in that as well because batteries obviously can be used to store solar energy. Fuel cells could be used to take other types of more renewable sources of hydrocarbons and convert those into electrical energy. And the demand for electricity just keeps going up. We have more and more devices. Our homes are getting larger. We all like air conditioning. We all like heat and all of those things. So our demand on the energy infrastructure of the world is going up pretty much, not every year, but pretty much so every year when you look at the demand for energy. So he's also got projects where if you're interested in energy, he definitely does that type of work, whereas Dr. Wallace, to my knowledge anyway, does not do any of that type of energy research. And so that's the difference, in my opinion, between the two groups, even though Dr. Wallace definitely does some analytical work. There's no doubt about it. You also had the video on with the discussion with our former Golden Eagle, Dr. Dale Rosado. We called him DJ when he was here, and you'll hear me referring to him as DJ because he was my graduate student. But Dr. Rosado, what was kind of the main takeaway that you got from watching the interview with Dr. Rosado?
I really felt like especially towards the end, like make your moves now rather than later, and get your network set up and get experiences when you had a chance to have them.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, take what comes your way early, right? Don't wait. Especially in the era of Corona, I don't know what's going to happen next semester. I don't know what's going to happen next year. It's less predictable than it used to be, right? When I was in school, which I know you all think has been a long time ago, but it doesn't feel that long to me. If I missed an opportunity, I knew another one was coming along. It was during the 90s. I mean, businesses were booming. Their jobs seemed to be growing on trees. That's not the case today. It's just a different world in which we live in. And so as an opportunity comes your way, you really need to think hard about doing that. Also, one of the takeaways was making your network early, right? You never know who is going to help you in that job that you seek, or in graduate school, if you want to go to graduate school or medical school. Make those connections now. You're making connections now in class, even though we're not interacting like I would normally like to. Typically, one of my classes, we're walking around, we're working on projects, we're doing that kind of stuff, and you get to know one another. This semester, not so much, okay? Just out of health concerns. But you need to be making those connections now. What was kind of interesting about Dr. Rosado's pathway?
He went from the junior college to the senior college.
That's right. So he was a transfer student. He came to Southern Miss. Was he originally interested in chemistry? No, he really wasn't. I mean, he started off with some very different thoughts, but then he got interested in the body. What emphasis did he study when he was here as an undergraduate? Chemistry or biochemistry? He was a biochemistry major, right? So he was the biochemistry emphasis major. Is he doing that now in his job? Not at all. But there are transferable skills both ways. If you end up going the regular chemistry route, as I like to call it, you can get into biologically relevant studies. You can get into biologically relevant fields. If you're in a biochemical emphasis, you can move the other way. I mean, you're learning transferable skills in either set. And so Dr. Rosado got his undergraduate with us in biochemistry, and then he decided to stick around. I picked him up as a graduate student. He began to study organic chemistry in my lab, although I don't have a video on it up there for you. We will talk about it one day. My lab is what I call a bioorganic lab. We make biomolecules. We do synthesis. We make molecules, and then we collaborate with folks across the country and across the world on using those biomolecules to incorporate them into other molecules and study the effects. Okay, so we use our synthetic skill set to help other folks study biology a little better. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about my research at a later date. But he really was the one that helped get my lab off the ground and got it all started. And he graduated with his PhD in 2009. So he was my first PhD student to graduate with a degree, with his PhD degree from my lab. So another thing that's interesting about Dr. Rosado is the number of careers that he's had since he left USM. So he left USM thinking he wanted to do the academic route. And so he went to Vanderbilt and did a postdoc for a year, and then got a job at Mississippi College. So he came back to Mississippi after his postdoctoral year, went to Mississippi College as an assistant professor and got started. Started working on, teaching. He thought he wanted to do a lot of teaching and do a little bit of research. And it turned out, as that was happening, he changed his mind. He didn't really want to do a whole lot of teaching and a little bit of research. He wanted to be more involved in problem solving on a day-to-day basis and not really the teaching component so much. So he left Mississippi College and he went to ERDEC, which is in Vicksburg, and that's the big federal lab space there in Vicksburg. and worked there for a few years. I got involved in working, at a government type facility. And while he was there, we had the federal government shutdown. And he decided then to move into industry. And so he then transitioned from, the government sector to the private sector, where he now works in at CF Industries. So here's an individual that, since he moved back to Mississippi, has found 3 different careers, has not had one day in which he was unemployed through a financial crisis, through the pandemic. And so my takeaway for you all on that is that there are jobs in Mississippi for people who have a chemistry degree, okay? It's not like you can walk out off on Hardy Street and find a job. It's not like that. But there are jobs around the state that employ chemists. And in fact, chemists make a very good salary in the state of Mississippi. If you go look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, you will see that chemists on average do better than the average chemist in Mississippi. And in large part because we have things like ERDEC in Vicksburg, okay? And so chemistry does offer a variety of careers. Now, he's involved at CF Industries, largely where they are looking at using the Haber process to convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. And that has a lot of uses. You all will learn about that in general chemistry, that particular process. So you can take nitrogen, you can convert it to ammonia. Ammonia can be converted into nitric acid, for example. Ammonia can be converted into fertilizers. Nitric acid can be used to make rocket fuels, fertilizers obviously for crops. So the nitrogen business is actually pervasive throughout a variety of industries, and they manufacture this in, I believe CF Industries is in Yazoo City. I'm not 100% sure on that, but there are opportunities. And one of the things that he told me was that they, right now with the pandemic, it's a little iffy, but they do offer internship opportunities there for students as well. So Dr. Rosado gave you his contact information. I highly recommend that each of you reach out to him, let him know that you're a student in my class. There's already a connection there, so that can help build your network, right? You all have something in common with him. You both are Golden Eagles. And so he would be happy to hear from you and give you any advice if you're interested in doing some sort of a internship. He'd be happy to talk with you about that as well. And so that's a perfect opportunity for you all to get some good experience industrially over a summer if you want to. Any questions about any of that? So, who else did we hear about that got a job within Mississippi? It was last week, right? His name was Stephen Knowles. Now he left after his bachelor's degree and got a job, right? So what do you think the difference is in their job prospects? Do you think Dr. Rosado has more job prospects or Mr. Knowles? Dr. Rosado has certain things that are available to him, but so does Mr. Knowles. Mr. Knowles also has not had a day of unemployment through all this stuff that's been happening, okay? But the types and roles that they take on will be different, right? So Dr. Rosado is going to be more of a laboratory manager, if you will. He's going to be a project leader. He's going to oversee individuals like Mr. Knowles, and he's going to be more responsible for the outcomes of the work that is done in the laboratory, whereas somebody like Mr. Knowles is going to be more on the technical side. Both have good job opportunities and prospects, but they are going to be different. And so if you're thinking about a career in chemistry, you really need to think about what level you want to be at when you go into the workforce, okay? So if you want to be more of a project leader, if you want to be more of a project manager, if you want to be in charge of a group of individuals, you're going to need some type of graduate education. Master's degree can get that, as you saw with Jessica Flynn. She's doing similar work to Dr. Rosado, but certainly a master's and maybe even a PhD, depending on what kind of level you want to be at the corporation. Okay. And again, you just have to decide kind of what level you want to be at, right? What's going to make you happy. And I can tell you, the higher you go, you do make more money, but you make more money for a reason. Okay. You have more responsibility and less time to yourself, and that's what they're buying. Okay. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a technical position, going and doing your job, enjoying your job, and then going home and enjoying your life. Okay. But the higher you go up, the more demands that there are going to be on your time. So this week's research and talks, C&EN talks with, is on the topic of research integrity. This is, I'm going to mess up her name, Kaoru Sakabe. I don't know how you pronounce that, and I apologize. She was a former head image screener at ASBMB Journals. And so I wanted you all to hear this one because of research integrity. I think it's very, very important that you all have a understanding of what research integrity is. What is research integrity to all of you? What do those two words mean when they're put together? Yeah.
It's making sure that the way you're collecting and presenting and drawing conclusions from your data makes sense and isn't misleading.
Okay, yeah, so misleading would be the word that I would take from what you just said, right? We don't want to be misleading in what we're doing. We want to be honest. What we do matters, right? It has social impacts. There's safety impacts in research. We test and we test again because we want to make sure that what we're doing is right? We don't want to mislead anybody. We want to tell the truth. But on the other hand, we're humans, aren't we? And we have other forces that might incentivize us to cheat. And I know each and every one of you probably thinks you're immune to that. Nobody is immune to that. That is a human nature. Okay? Everybody has an incentive to cheat. Because we evaluate things. Why is it that we have to have somebody at a scientific journal that looks at these things? Because faculty who are doing this research have an incentive to publish. It's called getting tenure, keeping their job. And if you're on a project that just, oh my gosh, I've spent so much time, I'm coming up for tenure, coming up for promotion, I can't seem to get anything to work, there is an incentive there to cheat. And we have to fight that as a group, right? We have to fight that. And so that's what they have folks like her for. So you submit your paper to the journal. They actually go through and screen each and every one of those images. And as you read, they use a variety of tools to see whether or not you manipulated an image. Are all manipulations cause for concern? No, we manipulate images all the time, right? My image may have come out, this way, and I want to turn it that way to look at it. But I've altered the image. I've changed the perspective. I probably haven't changed any of the data in doing that, right? I've just, instead of having to turn my head like this, I can now look at it like this, right? But that is altering an image. What might be an issue in terms of altering an image?
Misrepresenting your data in any type of way.
That's right. So when you all get into your biochemistry class, or even organic, you're gonna see these things that like in organic chemistry, we have a technique called thin layer chromatography. I don't know if any of you have ever done that before. And you get these little spots that tell you some information. And today you can actually take a picture of that with your phone and you can edit out things that you thought, well, I don't really want to show that. right? And you might think, well, I'm not changing anything. I'm just deleting out what I know isn't relevant. But actually you are, right? Because now all of a sudden it may look like you have one spot and, hey, my reaction was perfect. It went from starting material to complete product and no fuzzy stuff in between. That's a research integrity issue, right? That's a research integrity issue. What other issues do we have with research integrity, or integrity in general? Other than just looking at images. What else would journals, or even me as an instructor, be looking for? Plagiarism. Why is plagiarism such an issue? Why should we care?
Because there's no incentive to actually make good research, and you can just take from someone else, not give them credit.
Okay, so the key there is take from someone else. What do we call that? That's theft. That is theft. One of the most difficult things for you as students that you all have to deal with in this modern world that we live in today, that I didn't have to deal with. Yes, there were computers when I was in college, but the internet was just taking off. We didn't have all the snipping tools. Adobe Photoshop was extraordinarily expensive. Most of us didn't have it. It was very difficult to plagiarize. Well, it wasn't difficult. It was more difficult than it is today to plagiarize. Because I actually had to look at journals and paper, and I would actually have to go over and type what I wanted. Today, you can cut or copy, paste, click, drop. And that's stealing. That's stealing somebody else's ideas and calling it your own. And that's not okay. Is it okay to take something from somebody and share it if you give them credit? Yes. Right? If you're reading a paper and they said something perfect and that's what you want, you take it, a small snippet of it, you put it in quotes, you give them the proper credit for it, and then you build your ideas on that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay? But academic integrity and research integrity go hand in hand. They are the same kind of thing. Okay? The number one thing that will get your professors very, very upset with you is plagiarism and cheating. Don't do it. Okay? If you're unsure, ask. Some professors get really picky about it. If you didn't put the quotes exactly right and cite it exactly right, they'll tell you that that's plagiarism. I'm usually not that strict. If you attempted to tell me that it was somebody else's, I might write a note of, well, this isn't how you cite this, but I won't say you plagiarized. Okay? But some professors are very picky about it. Okay? And rightly so in some cases. So, very, very important. Okay? Journals are getting very, very serious about this. There have been some pretty famous cases with some pretty famous scientists where they submitted images that were clearly altered to change the data, change the claims that they made. What do you think can happen? Okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask if the, say, Ms. Akabe doesn't catch it, then wouldn't that be caught in like peer review, like with other people?
It might be caught in peer review. Peer review is a central pillar of the scientific process. So when I submit a paper for publication, for those of you who don't know, it's not like submitting your paper to a faculty member and they grade it. When I submit a paper to a journal, they submit it to usually at least 3 other reviewers who I don't know, that review that paper for scientific integrity, scientific soundness, and whether or not the work was relevant and should be published. But I have served as a reviewer on a number of publications, and I can tell you that the reviewers don't have time to pull up an image and look at it in that kind of detail to see whether or not it's been edited. What a reviewer might pick up is, now wait a second. I'm a reviewer in this, I'm in this actual area that this person's publishing in, and that sounds an awful lot like a paper I read 3 weeks ago. Oh, they plagiarized. They took, cut and paste, and that happens. A reviewer might pick up on something like that, but probably not so much on the images. But, having somebody that's there that's got a scientific eye, if you will, looking at images every day and using the tools correctly and knows how to do that is a very, very important thing. So this is another potential job avenue for many of you, right? You can actually get a science degree and you can end up working in the publishing industry, right? You could work in the publishing industry. You can work in the patent industry. There's a number of scientists that I went to school with who now work in Washington, D.C. in the patent office. They don't sit at a lab bench and wear a white lab coat, but they look at patents that are coming in from companies and universities, and they're trying to determine whether or not that invention is novel or if it is just the same old, okay? You've got to have some scientific knowledge for that, okay? So again, job opportunities that I would consider non-traditional in a lot of ways that are very, very important. Any other take-home messages that you took from this reading? No? Okay.
I did like the mention of the AI image checkers.
Uh-huh. The Nobel Prize in Chemistry came out. Before we watch the video on CRISPR, can anybody tell me what is so significant about this particular Nobel Prize, both from a scientific perspective and a social perspective? Damien.
The scientific aspect is that using CRISPR, you can now it's much easier to cut out genes and manipulate DNA, and from the readings had a number of different I don't know the word, opportunities for different businesses and organizations to use it in more diversement in the gene editing field from a social standpoint. They found this way. It was 2014, like early 2010, when they first discovered this. Now it's 2020, so finally getting the recognition they deserve. And also, there are two women who also
That's right.
did this.
That's right. I believe in chemistry anyway. These are the first time that the Nobel Prize has been given to two women for the same prize.
And also on the science of it, it's the prize is for the chemical process, but the chemical process for the most part, has wide biological applications.
Very, very much so. Extremely wide biological applications, right? And I think this shows you the intersection of chemistry with biology, right? Chemistry, you may have had a textbook at one point that was titled Chemistry, the Central Science. You may have heard of that textbook. Chemistry is, by a large number of people, is considered to be the central science because it intersects with physics and biology, material science. Chemistry is very central to anything that actually exists because things that exist are made up of atoms, right? And so chemistry is considered the central science. Now, I will give my biology friends this. CRISPR is a molecular biology technique, but it has very, very significant chemical interactions that occur, and so that's why they won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, okay? And so you all will have, as part of your notebook reflection, I believe it's the notebook reflection, yeah, for this week, on looking at the previous 10 Nobel Prizes that were given. You're going to have to look that information up, okay? And so, discuss which one of those previous 10, not this year's, but the previous 10 years, so that would be 2010 through 2019, which one of those is your favorite Nobel Prize and why. You have to kind of talk about that. So,
The gene editing method.
why isn't it coming through my speaker? Here. I don't know. Let's see.
Known as Crispr.
It's not going to let me play it through the speakers for some reason. I don't know why. Sorry about that. Anyway, the video, which you all should have watched anyway, right, talks about CRISPR, and it is a gene editing process. Where did they come up with the idea? Did they just sit at a table and go, hey, let's see if we can come up with CRISPR? What was their inspiration?
A bacterial immune system.
Yeah, it's a bacterial defense system, right? So when a virus attacks a bacterial cell, it incorporates a bit of that viral DNA into its own code, right? And so that's where they got their inspiration to figure out, hey, we could make these target sequences, we can add the Cas9 gene to it, and we can then cut at specific sites of DNA and then do other things with it, right? And that's kind of cool. So studying these little microbes all of a sudden has blossomed into this big industry, a Nobel Prize, right? And there are many, many things that are being promised by CRISPR. Its power as a research tool is unquestioned. But questions still remain as to whether or not we're going to be able to do what?
Gene editing on people.
Yeah, the questions still remain whether or not we're going to be able to fix genetic diseases in an effective manner with it. But that's the hope. That's the question. There are a variety of hypotheses left to test, right? And CRISPR gives them the tool to do that, to test those hypotheses. What are some genetic diseases that we hope to address with this?
Well, if you're following the news on it, a genetic susceptibility to HIV.
Okay, so a genetic susceptibility to HIV. That one I didn't know. Sickle cell anemia. Those are genetic disorders, right? We'd like to be able to repair those types of situations. Certain genes lead to a propensity to acquire cancers, right? Wouldn't it be kind of neat if we could go in and edit those particular genome sequences to reduce your risk of getting cancers in the future? There are lots of potentials and hopes. And what you'll find is that usually the hype doesn't pay off, but you do make significant gains in a variety of areas. Will this cure everything? No, right? But we're going to be able to develop a variety of cures, hopefully, for a variety of different diseases in the future using the technology that CRISPR has provided us. Are there any social issues at all talking about gene editing?
I got two. So one, in our last year, in our field credit biology class, possibly we called Gattaca, and it dealt with a situation like this, basically where like we as people, like we have come to rely on like gene editing, and we like the better your genes were, the higher off where you were in like the political system.
Mhm.
And so from like a social standpoint, it shouldn't get to that point. I would say that we just focus on just getting the good. Don't just try to make these super babies that can do this, and that, and create a different hierarchy in like society. And also like in a text talked about I forgot his name. They edited babies in Asia, and that caused a lot of alarm and like bringing up the ethical standpoint of if this was okay or not.
Yeah, there's a lot of ethical questions with every technology that we have. And we have to learn to deal with those ethical questions. That does not mean that we shy away from these technologies and the things that they can do for us. They are just things, and what we do with them determines whether it's good or bad, right? But yeah, so there's a whole field of study called bioethics, right? And so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you might want to study some philosophy and some ethics type courses. There's certainly interesting case studies that one needs to consider. And this is part of also research integrity, right? You don't want to be the mad scientist doing things recklessly, like you see in some of the old films, right? You want to do things in an ethical manner, in a way that helps society and doesn't become a burden on it. And so anytime you do research with living subjects, for example, you have to go through a board review, even at the University of Southern Mississippi. So if I wanted to do even a simple survey study that I was planning on publishing of my Chemistry 108 students, I would have to write up a prospectus for that and submit it to the bio review board so that they know that I'm protecting your identity, that personalized identifiable information is not getting out, that in no way would this harm you, right? And I'm not even going to stick you with a needle or anything. I'm just going to ask you to fill out a few questions so that I can write a paper on how Chemistry 108 students' perceptions of chemistry at the end of the semester changed. You know, I mean, we could do a study on that and I could publish it. But I would have to go through our review board to get something like that done. And so I'm not doing that. And so you all have not received any notices from our review board or anything of that nature. So we're good. So, are these the first women to win the Nobel Prize in chemistry? No. There have been numerous women who have won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. Madame Curie won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. I believe in chemistry and physics, or is it twice in chemistry? I can't remember. But anyway, she won the Nobel Prize twice, who I think was the first person to win the Nobel Prize twice. So there is a long history of the Nobel Prizes going to females and being shared by females, but this is the first time that two females jointly have won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. And I think that's a very significant social milestone and something that has been long overdue. There are certainly cases where women have been not awarded the Nobel Prize that people have been kind of shocked by. Watson and Crick, of course, won the Nobel Prize for the double helix of DNA. And, oh, forgive me, I forget her name now, Rosalind Franklin, I think, really should have been on that Nobel Prize. There's no question about Watson and Crick's contribution, but there is also no question in my mind of her contribution to that particular prize. Mac?
Didn't they steal something from her desk or something? Or I heard some story about that. Like they found some on their desk, or then they kind of thought of some, and then they quickly write up something.
That's possible. I don't know the history on that so much. I've certainly heard those types of things, but everything that I've heard along those lines has been by word of mouth and not by anything that I've read. So I'm not 100% sure on that, so I won't comment, but wouldn't surprise me. at all. All right, well, I'm going to give you all 4 extra minutes. That's all I had to talk about today. Don't forget your attendance assignments due by 5:15 today. That should be open and available for you now. And your notebook reflection will be due by tomorrow evening, as always. So have a great rest of the week, and I will see you all later.